Now, how's that compared to Microsoft? Well, we're going to do a whole lot of apples and oranges and bananas and whatnot in this talk. So let's start with the first one that's not quite the right measure. Microsoft last year, they earned $110 billion in revenues. Right? So again, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has in the bank, so to speak, $50 billion of money. Microsoft earned $110 billion from customers. They got to keep about half of that, a little less than half of that. So they actually earned, their profits last year were almost as much as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has. If we're going to look just at the balance sheet of Microsoft, they have more cash than $51 billion right now. I didn't go look that up today. But the company is worth $1.2 trillion. That's their market cap. That is the value of all the shares of Microsoft times the last share price. Right? It's down. It was 1.3 billion before the market crashed. But we don't really need to play any violins about that. Here we have the best apples to apples comparison. 51 billion of value versus 1.2 trillion of value. That's a big ratio there. That's not 10x, right? 10x would be a $500 billion. We're talking like a 20x spread between the nonprofit side of Bill Gates's life and the for-profit side of Bill Gates's life. Right? Bill Gates still has $100 billion of value that he himself owns. But the question is that indicative of the for-profit nonprofit split, or is it different? So to do that, to look at it more generally, I dove in and looked at the top 100 US foundations and charities. And it turns out that the top 100 foundations and charities are all foundations. And when it turns out, when you dig in a little further, they're all money from entrepreneurs with just a handful of real estate investors and some other investors mixed in. But it's 95% money that was donated into a foundation from an entrepreneur who succeeded wildly. Right? That's what those foundations are. And on the other side, on the for-profit side, it's the top 100 public companies. We call that the S&P 100, right? Companies you can buy and sell on the stock market right now. So what's the scale difference between those two? Well, you can look these up, right? So all the values of all that are all public, and the total assets, the total amount of capital owned by that 100 top foundations is $290 billion, billion with a B. Seems like a big number, except just Microsoft, just one of the top 100 companies. And it's in the top 5, right? Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they're all in the $1 trillion club. But the top 100 US foundations don't have as much money as Microsoft, right? When you look at the total value of those top 100 public companies, including the market crash, it's $15 trillion. So now, again, we're not talking about a factor of 10 or a factor of 20. There's so much more money sitting over there in the public companies than the foundations. But again, this is apples and oranges and bananas and whatnot, because that's all the money that the foundations have, not what they can spend. They can only spend a small portion of that. Otherwise, there would be no foundation next year. Right? So how much did they spend? In 2019, collectively, those top 100 foundations spent $20 billion. Again, billion with a B, big number, $20 billion. But it was like 7% or 8% of all the money they had, which is better than the 5% mandated by law, but it's still a tiny little piece, right? So they've invested the $290 billion in the stock market. It's probably down now, right? We'll find out in a year. They took some of those profits and they gave it away, right? The endowments are supposed to keep growing because most of these foundations are perpetual. Now, what did they spend that money on? Well, they spent it on all sorts of stuff. But going back to the unintended consequences of Carnegie, what we expect them to spend their money on is poverty, hunger, global health, right? The big issues of the world. They spend it on more than that. But let's just suppose, just for an instant here, that all they were going to spend it on was solving the problem of global poverty, right? Global poverty, not national poverty, right? That's a problem too. But it turns out that half of the world lives on less than $3 a day. Seriously, if you haven't seen that number before, half of humanity lives on less than $3 a day. So that's 3.5 billion people. So what if we took this $20 billion and we just spent it to try and solve that problem? Well, we would have $5.71 per person to solve global poverty. I don't think that's enough. right? That's barely enough to actually send a field worker out to do anything, let alone actually doing anything. It's just not enough money. So what about governments, right? I get pushback on this going, well, yeah, but the governments do things too. And they do. And in the US, all of that foreign aid, right? I'm going to just focus on the foreign efforts right now. All the foreign aid funnels through the US aid budget, right? There's a lot of organizations, but it all goes to that budget, not the military aid, if you want to call that aid, but everything that's supposed to be just out there to do good in the world goes through US aid. And in 2019, that was $15 billion. So we can add those two together and it gives us a slightly bigger budget. And the math is easy on this one. We got $35 billion and 3.5 billion people. So that's $10 per person. It's better. It's better than 5, but it's still not enough. It's just barely enough to, let's say, put a cook stove in every household that needs one, which is 1 billion of them. It's not enough to feed people for a year. It's not enough to do some micro lending so that they can build their own companies. Maybe it's enough to vaccinate everyone when the COVID-19 vaccine comes out. Maybe, but probably not. It probably costs more than $10 to get the vaccine out into every village. And again, apples, oranges, bananas, and whatnot. Let's look at one more that's completely out. Let's look at kumquats or kiwi fruits or whatever you want to call this. But I had to go look this up. How much was spent by the top 100 advertisers in the US last year? Right. So this is Procter & Gamble, right? Tide. It's Colgate-Palmolive. It's Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile. It's General Motors, Ford, Fiat Chrysler, Toyota, Honda. You know, it's the big advertisers. You know them. You've seen them on TV. Oh, just think Super Bowl ads. How many Anheuser-Busch Super Bowl ads do we need each year? We already know their products. We know these products, and yet they spend $124 billion a year advertising these products to us. $124 billion spent in order to earn more than $124 billion in profits. That's still a factor of 3 over the top 100 foundations and all the government money. It's in the realm of every charity ever done in 2019 in the United States, including every dollar given to a church, every dollar donated to a PTO, every dollar donated to anything anywhere in the country is about the same as all the advertising. It's just not enough. And so my conclusion when I found these numbers and started sharing them, my conclusion is that unintended consequence from the Carnegie invention has created a system where we're looking to an industry that doesn't have enough money to do what we're asking them to do. They're under budgeted. That's why the foundation world always seems like there's not enough resources, because there's not enough resources. There's simply not enough money to do what we ask them to do. Meanwhile, there's this enormous amount of money over in the public companies. And so the thesis of Fledge and the thesis I'm trying to teach here is that if we can create companies that do good with a for-profit model, and we can invest in these companies, we can find them, they exist, there's hundreds of them. We've gotten thousands of applications at Fledge of these companies. If we can find them and we can invest in them, we can grow them. And if we grow them, then they can become companies that can sustain themselves, they can do more impact on their own profits, and they can be the scale of Microsoft or bigger. There are companies that can be billion-dollar companies or someday trillion-dollar companies that in doing business do good in the world. So one example of this, you might be skeptical. So one example of this, back in the early 90s, there was an entrepreneur who said, we shouldn't be selling organic, healthy food in little tiny natural food stores. We should be selling them in supermarkets. So he started a supermarket focused on healthy or organic food, right? He called it Whole Foods. It was a hit. It became a chain of hundreds of stores around the country that sell organic and healthy food. It was such a hit that every other grocery store had to do something about it. So I live in a neighborhood without a Whole Foods, but when I go and walk over to Safeway, right? Safeway is not known as the most sustainable company in the world. When I walk over to Safeway, they have organic and healthy food. Why do they do that? Because they're making sure there's no Whole Foods that starts up in my neighborhood. So Whole Foods not only succeeded as a company, it's a multi-billion-dollar company, got purchased by Amazon. We're not going to talk about the implications of that. But they succeeded wildly, not just at their own business. They didn't just become wildly profitable with their business. They actually changed the entire industry. They made the entire supermarket industry pivot to compete with them. And the consequence of that is that the entire industry is more organic, more sustainable, more better for us with healthier food in bigger quantities at lower prices, simply because this for-profit got started up in Austin, Texas in early 90s. That's the kind of impact that I think we can have in every industry in the world. That's the kind of impact I'm trying to teach in the Foundation Accelerator. And these are the kind of lessons that we'll do in those 10 weeks. We're not just going to teach you the minutia of what debt and equity and revenue-based investing looks like. We will do some of that, but we're going to give you the bigger ideas of how you can use your money to make change in the world, and how you can get that money back so you can make even more change in the world, and how whoever you gave the money to can make even more change in the world. We're going to do that in a cohort of peers so that you have a cohort moving forward. It's only going to be 10 weeks long, but you're going to keep talking to these people for years to come. We're going to do it 10 weeks long so that we actually have a deadline, so we can make some money move in the market, as we would say in the for-profit world. We're going to make some money move. We're going to make some investments. We're going to have that shared goal at the end. We're going to drive toward that, and that's going to make it happen. This is week 2 of our 4-week series. Hopefully we'll see you on Thursday. We'll send around an invite for that, and this time we'll send around the link on how to log in. At the end of the 4th week, we'll ask you if you want to join in. The 10 weeks are the 10 weeks right after that, April 23rd through June 25th. The cost of this program is a $55,000 recoverable grant. We fully intend that you'll recover that grant, hopefully a whole lot more than what you gave us. Hopefully you can then turn around and use it again and again and again. All the grants go through a 501c3 partner of ours. It's called Realize Impact. And this program is operated by Fledge, which is that global network of impact accelerators. So why wouldn't you do this? You're stuck at home. You're clearly working at home. You can't go out and do field visits. It's really hard to make new grants right now because you can't meet anyone for the first time. And so this is a great time to take a few weeks, learn a new tool, and then when we're back to business in a few months or next year, then you'll have this tool to go and use alongside grant making. We're not saying giving up grant making. We're saying you need a second tool. If you have any questions, you'll find more details at foundations.fledge.co. You are totally welcome to email me any questions. I'm looney@fledge.co. And we'll see you next week.